My best friend of 20 years registered our songs with a record label under his name alone. I found out from a social media post. What I found when I started looking was 20 years of shared music turned into something it was not. There are things you create with someone that do not take the form of a contract, that take the form of two people in a small room with guitars and notebooks, and hours that pass without either of them counting, that take the form of a phrase you started and he finished, and in the final product you can no longer clearly distinguish where the line was. Co-authorship in music between friends who compose together almost never starts with a document. It starts with trust, with the assumption that what the two of them build belongs to both of them. My best friend had taken that assumption and decided it was not true, or that he could act as if it were not. And I found out the same way you find out many things in this era, from the scroll of an ordinary afternoon on social media. My name is Mateo. I am 42 years old. I am a telecommunications engineer during the day and a musician in all the time that remains after the day. I have spent 20 years composing songs, most of them with Rodrigo, who is 43, who is a freelance professional musician, and who since university has been the person with whom I have had the longest and most important musical conversation of my life. Rodrigo and I had a shared language that had been built in 20 years of sessions in his home studio, in my living room, in my parents' room when we were younger and the world was simpler. A language where I brought the harmonic progressions and he brought the lyrics, and in the process of combining them, those borders dissolved, and what came out was something both of us had made without either being able to make it alone in exactly that way. 53 songs in 20 years. Not all equally good, but all belonging to both of us. That was what I believed, until the Tuesday I saw the post. The post was from the independent record label Volumen Sur. It was a list of new catalog acquisitions, with small covers of each album or EP. And among the covers, there was an image I recognized before reading the text. It was a photograph Rodrigo had taken on a trip we had made together 3 years ago. A photo of a highway in the early morning hours. An image I knew exactly where it came from because I had been there when he took it. The text said, Rodrigo Soto signs with Volumen Sur his debut EP with 5 original songs. 5 original songs. I opened the link. There was a list of the 5 titles. I recognized all of them. All 5 were songs we had composed together. I sat with the phone in my hand for a time I will not attempt to describe with precision because the imprecision is part of what it was. It was not immediate anger. It was something more like dizziness. The feeling that something you thought was solid has just shown it had a layer you did not know was there. I went to the label's profile. I looked for more information about the EP. I found it had been registered 2 months earlier, with Rodrigo as the sole composer and sole performer, without any mention of co-authorship anywhere. I did not call Rodrigo that night. What I did was review what I could review. I searched whether there was public registration of the songs in the database of Mexico's Musical Rights Management Society. I found 4 of the 5 songs registered, all in Rodrigo's name as sole author. One of them, the one that was most clearly mine in its harmonic structure, because it was a progression I had developed for months before Rodrigo put lyrics to it, also only in his name. That last one reached me in a specific way the other 4 had not yet, because I had played that progression in front of Rodrigo for the first time in my living room on a Sunday, 4 years ago, and I still remembered the face he had made when he heard it. And now that progression was officially only his. I call an attorney specializing in musical intellectual property, not a friend. An attorney who did not know me and to whom I described the situation generally before giving names. His name was Eduardo, and he had spent 15 years in copyright law in the music industry. He listened. He asked me 4 things. Whether I had evidence of having participated in the composition of those songs, recordings, notes, messages, files with dates. Whether there was any written agreement between Rodrigo and me about the co-authorship of our songs. Whether we had published or performed those songs together in any public context before Rodrigo's registration. And when I had found out about the registration, I answered him that yes, I had evidence, though not in a systematic way. Recordings on my phone from sessions where both voices and both instruments could be heard. Text messages where we sent each other fragments and suggestions. GarageBand files on my computer with creation dates that preceded Rodrigo's registration. That there was no written agreement because we had never thought we would need one. That we had played together at 3 semi-public events in the last 2 years, including a performance at a small festival where the program had listed both of us as composers. That I had found out that afternoon. Eduardo told me what I was describing was a case of authorship usurpation that had legal challenge mechanisms before the Rights Management Society. That the evidence I described, though not systematically organized, could be sufficient to support claim. That the first thing was not to confront Rodrigo yet. That the second was to organize and document all the evidence I had before any formal move. I spent 3 days searching and organizing. Session recordings on my phone. I found 22 recordings showing the composition process of different songs with both of us present. Text messages between Rodrigo and me. Years of exchanges where we sent each other ideas, lyrics in development, arrangement suggestions. In several, there were specific messages about 3 of the 5 EP songs with comments from both of us that made it clear it was a shared process. The festival program where we had played, I had a photo of the program on my phone. It said Rodrigo Soto and Mateo Vargas. Original compositions. The GarageBand files. I had working versions of 4 of the 5 songs with last modification dates that in all cases preceded Rodrigo's registration date. At the end of 3 days, I had a file that Eduardo described as solid for 4 of the 5 songs and reasonable for the 5th. The confrontation with Rodrigo I had on Thursday of that week, in his home studio, which was the same place where we had composed most of those songs. That irony was not lost on either of us. I arrived with the file in a folder. Rodrigo received me with the tension of someone who knows the conversation coming is not ordinary, even if they do not know exactly how far it's going to go. I put the label post in front of him. I asked him whether he could explain what I was looking at. Rodrigo did not deny the songs were from the EP. He did not deny we had composed them together. What he did was what I did not expect. He told me he had thought I would not want to be involved in the commercial aspect of the songs. That he knew me and knew I was skeptical about the music industry. That he had assumed that if he told me he wanted to sign with a label, I would have said no or that I did not care. That he had preferred to move forward alone and see what happened. I asked whether he had thought about asking me. He told me yes. That he had thought about telling me. That every time he had been about to do it, he had found a reason to postpone it. I asked whether at any point he had calculated that what he was doing was registering as his own songs that belonged to both of us. He took a while. He told me yes, that he had calculated it, that he had rationalized that since he was going to be the performer, the registration in his name was sufficiently reasonable, that he knew it was not exactly right, but that in the moment what he wanted had weighed more than what was appropriate. That honesty at the end was what changed the tone of what followed. Because what Rodrigo had said was not the defense of someone who believes what they did was right. It was the acknowledgement of someone who had calculated exactly what they were doing and had chosen anyway. I told him what he had told me mattered, that the honesty in that moment determined what was possible to do next, that what was not possible was for those songs to continue registered only in his name, that had to be corrected regardless of any other conversation about our friendship. Rodrigo said yes, that he was going to contact the label and the management society to start the correction process. I told him Eduardo was going to be in contact with his attorney to ensure the process happened correctly. The correction process lasted 2 months. The 4 songs with solid evidence were re-registered with co-authorship by both of us. The 5th ended in a negotiated agreement where Rodrigo acknowledged my contribution to the arrangements even though the lyrics were entirely his. The label was notified of the changes. The future royalties from those songs are structured in a way that corresponds to the documented co-authorship. The relationship with Rodrigo is the hardest part of this process to describe. 20 years. The person with whom I had the most important musical conversation of my life. What he had done was not erased by the legal process. And at the same time, the honesty with which he had admitted it when I confronted him, without elaborate defenses and without trying to build an alternative narrative, was something that mattered for what could follow. We have talked several times in the months that followed. Not about music yet. About what happened. About why it happened. about what it says about the dynamic we had for 20 years, where Rodrigo was the one who took the relationship to the world, and I was the one who preferred the private space of creation. About how that dynamic had created in him a feeling that the commercial side was his territory and that I would not claim it. That feeling did not justify what he did, but it was information about something neither of us had named in 20 years. I still do not know whether we will compose together again. What I do know is that if we do, it will be on a different foundation, with agreements on the table, with the distribution of authorship explicit before the process starts, with the clarity that what we create together belongs to both of us in a way that now has paper in addition to trust. What I want you to take from his story has very practical parts for anyone who creates with other people in any field. The first and most urgent: if you compose music, write, or create any intellectual work with another person, document the co-authorship from the start. Not because you do not trust, but because documentation protects the relationship in addition to protecting the rights. A simple co-authorship agreement that specifies the percentages of each collaborator and that is signed before or during the creation process is the most basic protection tool that exists. The second, keep evidence of the creative process with dates. Session recordings, messages where you exchange ideas, files with creation dates. That evidence does not require an elaborate system. It requires the habit of saving what you are producing anyway. The third, if you discover that someone has registered as their own a work you created in collaboration, rights management societies have challenge mechanisms that work when there is evidence. Those mechanisms exist. Seek specialized legal guidance before acting because the process has specific steps that, if followed correctly, are effective. And the fourth, for whoever recognizes themselves in Rodrigo's position: the temptation to move forward alone in the commercial part of something you created with someone because you calculate that person will not want to be involved is a temptation worth not giving into. Because the question you did not ask has an answer you do not know. And that answer could have been different from the one you imagined. If this story reached you, comment. Do you have written co-authorship agreements with the people you create with, or do you trust that trust is sufficient? Like if you believe independent creators should receive more education about copyright before collaborating on projects that may gain commercial value. Subscribe for more real stories. Share with someone who creates with other people and has never thought about formalizing co-authorship. Practical tip: if you compose, write, or create with other people, regularly consider making a simple written co-authorship agreement for each project. It does not have to be an elaborate legal document. It could be an email where both of you confirm each person's percentages and the conditions for any commercial use. That email with a date and both parties' responses is a valid co-authorship document that can make an enormous difference if it is ever needed.